Before I tell my story, let me set the scene. It was the summer of 2009, and I was 16 years old. I grew up in a neighborhood in a typical small coastal tourist town in Oregon with my mom. I was a slightly rebellious but responsible kid, and I did good in school. I didn't smoke much and only drank occasionally, and I actually liked going to parties sometimes. I had a boyfriend but kept it pretty private from my mom. We had been dating for a while and were getting closer, though we were both pretty careful about keeping it quiet. This took place in early July, when the warm summer nights start to get longer and the days feel endless. It was a very hot summer though, and all the popular girls would wear crop tops to show off a flat tummy, and one day I had bought one for myself, along with some denim shorts and flip-flops, just to try and see what it was like to fit in more. I began wearing this summer style regularly after that. Later, I wondered if the outfit is what started it all. Suddenly I started to get messages. They were left on our doorstep or taped to the screen door, notes with messages such as, "I've been watching you blossom," and "You're becoming quite the little woman." I didn't tell anyone. I strongly suspected the idiot gang at school. 2 of them lived close to me, and I thought they were teasing me for changing my style. Teenage logic, we've all been there. To show them that I didn't care, I wore my new style all the damn time. One morning I noticed that someone had stepped onto the flowers in our front porch planters and the backyard garden. I told my mom about it. She worried it was someone checking the place out, planning a break-in, and asked me to make sure I latched the front door whenever I was alone. Things had gone missing before, insignificant things, but still you never know. My mom owned a rather successful small business, and to celebrate the 10-year mark she wanted to treat her employees to a weekend away, and had booked a place up in Bend, Oregon. I was often used to being left alone at home. Sometimes her work demanded that she traveled for a few days, and it wasn't a problem. Again, I was a responsible kid, and anyway, only 3 doors down the street lived a couple of people that we knew, and they usually checked in on me if I was alone for many days. They had no kids of their own, and often helped out with everyone else's. It was on the Saturday that it happened. I arrived home very late on foot after having watched Mamma Mia at a friend's backyard movie night. I walked in the front door and noticed a draft. I wondered if I had forgotten to latch the back sliding door before I left. Then I noticed that it felt like someone had been in the house. I wondered if I had left things this way. I walked through the house to the kitchen when suddenly Rick, the handyman from 3 doors down, stood in front of me blocking the hallway. Rick told me that he just came to check in on me, which seemed strange since it was well past 11:30 at night and he smelled like whiskey and cigarettes. I told him I was fine and was off to bed and got the strangest feeling. Despite it being a warm, humid evening, I was shaking with cold. Something inside of me told me that this was an extremely dangerous situation. Something about it was off, as if he was wearing a mask, as if someone else was behind his eyes, not the friendly Rick that I had known for the past 5 years. He asked if I wanted wine and nodded in the direction of a wine bottle. I shook my head. I told him no, I don't drink much, that my mom didn't really allow it, and I tried to sound normal, but my voice didn't feel like my own. He told me I was almost a grown woman now and could do as I wished, continuing to pour wine into an unwashed glass. He kept telling me he had been watching me and how I had really grown and how beautiful I had become, and how he had noticed my new clothes and that I surely knew that it was an open invitation to men. He asked if I thought he was a nice person. He told me he would be good to me, that I could trust him, and he would be real gentle. I started to back towards the front door, but he stops me by grabbing hold of my upper arm and pulling me towards him. He told me not to be like that no one likes a tease, and when I try to break free, he laughs and asks if I want to play. He tells me he likes to play, and then he starts to shake me. I feel how much stronger he is than I, and realize I have to make him let go long enough for me to run. At this point, it was as if someone else has hijacked my brain, and I started saying and doing things that I wasn't even aware of until afterwards. I hear myself say that I like to play, and he smiles and starts to touch my hair. He dragged me off to the guest room, and I tried to pretend to be into it. I had never had sex at this point, or even truly wanted to. I had no idea how to fake it, but I tried. The moment he tossed me down on the bed, I told him he must go lock the front door and latch the back sliding door, as I tried to look eager and not scared out of my mind. He said okay, and told me not to move. I was on my feet faster than I thought possible, and I locked the guest room door from the inside. My plan had, however, not turned out as I had hoped. Unfortunately, he had pulled me into the guest room, not my bedroom. My bedroom had a window that led out onto the roof of the garage, and from there I could have jumped. The guest room had no such escape, but I did have access to my cell phone. My phone had very low battery, and I was shaking so badly I could barely type, but I managed to send a quick text to my mom telling her what was happening, and that my phone was about to die. My mom texted back quickly that she would call the sheriff and told me to hold tight, while Rick tried to open the lock with a screwdriver, shouting at me and promising to gut me like a fish when he got in. My phone died shortly after. My mom also called our other neighbor, Bill. He used to be a cop and often said how he would treat any burglar to a trip to the emergency room if given the chance. Bill arrived before the sheriff, and he didn't break his promise. But the sound of the fighting outside the room was terrible, and I had no idea what was going on outside, or even who was winning the fight. Bill was an older guy but fit. However, I worried that Rick might still have a weapon, like the screwdriver. I don't think I dared to breathe until Bill asked me if I was okay. And I didn't dare get out of that room before the sheriff arrived. And even then, I was almost unable to move, as if my mind had escaped my body. A man who I had known since I was a kid had suddenly started stalking me and planned to use the fact that my mom was out of town to assault me, and God knows what else. I trusted him, and I had been so wrong. I still have trust issues today. I spoke to his wife once, long after the incident. Rick had fled into the nearby woods that night, and rumors spread he was arrested later in another town. And his wife told me that the reason she never had kids with him was that deep down she suspected he had issues, later confirmed by this incident and subsequent therapist testimony. It was a few years ago now. I lived in a medium-sized coastal tourist town, and I worked at a nearby beachside tourist shop with cafe. It was rather large and had been in the community for years, so we got a mix of tourists and locals. Some important backstory with the area. While the town was removed in a sense from the major city, there was a bus line that went directly from the larger city to this town, and it just so happened to drop off right by our shop. As it goes with some public transit, especially in this area, there were often homeless people that got off at the stop and would come to the first place with food and drink and a place to wait, so our shop. I worked at this shop for almost a year and a half as a cashier, then I was promoted to supervisor. I am very attractive and a vivacious woman. I attracted a lot of unwanted and unwarranted attention, especially during night shifts. I have a good head on my shoulders and am an expert at dealing with the creeps and the leering jackasses. This guy, though, he was a whole other story. It started in mid-July. I had just got to work. I usually worked closing shifts because of school schedule, and during the shift handover with the day supervisor Tasha, I was informed to make sure I hid the shift schedule clipboard. Our shop was incredibly busy with the summer tourist season and the local community, so we had to balance schedules and breaks and tasks, and things could change at a moment. We had a clipboard with the people on the front counter for the day and the estimated break schedule. It also had their in and out time. Supervisors were often also on the front counter, not just hanging out in the back office, so we were at ground zero as it was when things got crazy. I asked Tasha why I had to hide it, and she informed me that some guy had been hanging around, and she had caught him twice leaning over the front counter to look at the schedule. Our shop had a small cafe area in the front with tables and free Wi-Fi, so it wasn't uncommon for people to linger sometimes hours at a time. This was especially true for the drifters who wander the boardwalk who had nowhere else to go. As long as they weren't causing trouble, we didn't kick them out. Anyway, as the night progressed, I noticed a slinky dude with incredibly thick and oily hair and a weird stare sort of wandering around. He would walk up and down the souvenir aisles, go to the cafe area with nothing, and sit and stare at the front counter, then mosey on outside to the outside tables, then repeat. After about 1 hour of this, I approached and asked if I could help, expecting him to say no and to scarper off. I was taken back when he moved extremely close to me and asked when I would be working next. His hands were positioned like he was ready to grope me, and his eyes were fixated on my chest. He was also a good 6 inches taller than me, which made me feel even more uncomfortable. Something about this one really set me off, so I called James over, who was stocking shelves nearby. James is a big guy, and when he came over and asked if there was a problem, the creep quickly walked away. I was quiet the rest of the night. Cut to about 2 weeks later. We're doing late-night restocking t-shirts and beach souvenirs, so we're working way past the shop's closing time at 10:30 p.m. I have myself and 2 other relatively newbies working with me. Around 11:15 p.m., while we were neck-deep in counting, the landline phone in the office starts to ring and ring and ring. Normally, we wouldn't answer the phone after hours, but the shop management had recently told us to answer it, so we did. When it first rang, someone answered, but whoever was calling hung up immediately. About 5 minutes later, it rings again, and someone else answered. Same thing. They hung up right away. Then again. I didn't think much of it until it rang a 4th time, and I picked up. I answered to say that it was past our operating hours, and to try again in the morning. There was heavy breathing on the line, and when I said hello again, this raspy voice that was super familiar said my name. I repeated that it was past hours, and I was about to hang up, when he shouted that I better tell him when I worked next, or he was going to come down there and make me pay. I had no idea this was the same dude, but I got a familiar chill. I immediately hung up, told management, and we proceeded to call the police. We had to do this a lot when drunk drifters who wander the boardwalk would wander in and steal or get violent. We knew the local police officer Matt would help, so we had him come by and do a few patrols. That was about it. I would say about an hour and a half later, as we were wrapping up, the creepy dude is at the door banging all unholy, screaming at us to let him in. There were about 5 other people near the door, all burly men, and they chased him off. I called Matt and he said he would do another sweep. Of course, after that we made some changes. I may have had issues with some of the shop management, but they were really good about keeping us safe. I requested day shifts only, which they tried to accommodate the best they could. But I didn't write the schedule, and our direct team shop manager had a propensity to be an ass, and would sometimes schedule people when they had requested not to work. She often paired me with one of my co-workers since we were fast workers and could get the end-of-day closing process done early, so they could save like 30 minutes on labor. There were some other minor incidents, I guess, with the stalker coming in, but he was quickly booted out by management. There was one incident where some dumbass on our team answered the phone and gave this dude my whole schedule for the week. Management had told the team not to give out staff schedules or personal details to anyone, but after this happened, I ended up explaining to everyone the full situation. The manager was furious that someone had given out my schedule. I was trying to get people to understand the gravity of the situation. Once he had my schedule, he was there every day I was working. One of my co-workers ended up trading some shifts with me as a cashier and not a supervisor, just so I could get some peace. After a few months of this guy really harassing me at work by lurking and waiting for me to get off, the staff all pitched in and walked me to my scooter in the alley side parking spot, or drove me home, or stayed with me until my boyfriend could come pick me up. Then it just kind of stopped really suddenly. So in around late August, I'm closing with 2 of my co-workers, and we were having a good time, as it was super slow that night. I offer to take care of some duties while one of them balances the till and closes them out. a difficult and somewhat nerve-wracking process, as he had to have the cash drawer out in plain view. The old shop had really bad security in that manner. Thank goodness we were never robbed. Tyler, one of our seasoned cashiers, stays on the front counter to help any customers, while I wipe down the cafe area and do the normal end-of-day closing process. I was collecting the trash from around the front end and getting ready to take it out back. In the middle of counting the money with the cash drawer open, my other coworker got this gut feeling that something wasn't right. He told me to stop and that he would take the trash out himself. I gave him a weird look, like he was saying I couldn't physically do it, which of course wasn't true. He just felt a sense of unease. I didn't complain. Taking out the trash to the nasty trash bins out back wasn't like a trip to Disney World after all. He threw the money back in the cash drawer and locked it, and grabbed the trash to take it behind the shop near the trash area, while I finished cleaning and Tyler was on the front counter. The service alley behind the shop where the trash went was pretty awful. It smelled horrible, and despite our best efforts, it was always messy. We shared it with a few other businesses, and with a constant wave of drifters who wander the boardwalk, we had frequent people going through trash bins behind the shops. My coworker told me later everything that happened while he was taking out the trash, and when we reviewed the security footage afterwards, we could see and hear the whole disturbing encounter. The service alley ended near a ravine with a small creek running through it. While he was tossing the trash bags, a figure suddenly darted into the alley and blocked the dim security light. My coworker looks up startled. It's this same dude. He's wearing a really large hoodie despite the warm weather, and he had his hands tucked into the front pocket. His head was bowed slightly, so he wasn't looking right at my coworker. But my coworker knew instantly who it was. My coworker will never forget that look of hunger and malice in his eyes, like his obsession with me had consumed every ounce of humanity in him and turned him sour. We hadn't had a problem in weeks, and we were all under the impression that he was gone based on things I had hinted at. This guy saunters forward and asks if he can bum a cigarette. My coworker doesn't smoke and clearly wouldn't do so on the job, plus he had hands filled with dripping garbage bags. The stalker knew that my coworker recognized him, so my coworker was confused why he was pretending they didn't know each other. My coworker told him that he was not welcome here, and that he had to leave, that he was about to call the police. The movement towards my coworker was so sudden, he barely had any time to react. Pouncing forward, hands jumped out of his pockets and onto my coworker's shoulders, pushing him against the wall. His next words were throaty and pained, almost as if he was crying in anger. He asked if my coworker was sleeping with me. He then told my coworker that I belonged to him and to keep his hands off his woman. My coworker shouted out of fear and anger, and then Tyler heard it from the front counter and came running outside. Then the dude bolted like a bat out of hell down the ravine and into the creek, where we think he waded through the big pipe down to where there was a small park he could hide out in. When my coworker returned, he was so terrified, he damn near had a panic attack in the stockroom. I called the police before I broke down and was sobbing uncontrollably. Tyler called my boyfriend Ben and asked him to come get me. He told me not to worry about finishing my shift, that he'd handle everything. Matt, the local police officer, came back out and did a look, but couldn't come up with anything. The shop leadership talked to me a few days later, but I didn't want to talk much about the guy. I filed a police report, but my boss, the crappy team shop manager, told me I shouldn't press charges because it could come back to bite them in the ass legally. Whatever the hell she meant by that. I quit soon after, and everyone understood why. I disappeared pretty much off the face of the earth for about 7 months. I know this story is getting super long, but there is one last thing that really nails how twisted this guy was. The stalker was an old friend of a friend of mine. Many years ago, I had met him at a party, and he had been really friendly, almost too much. He friended me on Facebook back when it was still new, and had kept rather quiet at first, messaging me here and there and wanting to chat. I made it clear that I was dating someone, and he seemed to ignore this and quickly got more aggressive in wanting to just hang out with me. I didn't want to cause any problems with my mutual friend, so I didn't unfriend this guy. But I did do what I could, which was turn off the chat so he couldn't bug me constantly. I tried to prevent him from contacting me without unfriending him, as I was positive that this would really set him off. I was very friendly and didn't want to cause any more problems, but it didn't work. He kept sending me flowers and stuff to my house, calling from unregistered numbers. How he got my number and address I still don't know, and sending almost half-hourly messages on Facebook. And then one day, he snapped. He went post to post on my Facebook, tagging his name on pictures of any guy, including my boyfriend Ben, as himself. He would then post disturbing comments claiming that we belonged together. On pictures where I was kissing Ben, he would write threats about wanting to hurt him. He insisted that we were destined to be together forever, really disturbing stuff. I ended up blocking him, and my friend talked me out of getting a restraining order for a while. But I obviously ended up getting one after he attacked my coworker in the service alley behind the shop. After I blocked him years ago, he completely disappeared from my life, and I honestly forgot about him until all this started happening again. And that's about it for this guy, thankfully. Never saw him again after that night, and I quit and moved out of the area a few months later. Partly because I was disgusted with my team shop manager and her lackluster attitude towards the events. She laughed when my coworker told her the guy came at him in the service alley behind the shop. And partly because I had quite enough with the crazy creepers. I visit that shop now and then to see old friends, and I hope I never have to see that disgusting guy ever again. This happened about 3 years ago when I was 15, and I was attending my first summer at an outdoor adventure camp in Northern California. Granted, I was only there for 4 weeks, but it was the longest 4 weeks of my life. My lodge was full of girls I didn't know, and one girl nobody seemed to know at all, Chloe. She was kind of the oddball, and it was obvious after a few days that she isolated herself and had a hard time fitting in. So I tried my best to include her in our normal activities, while the rest of my lodge mates didn't pay her much attention. After about a week, she started clinging to me, which I figured was because she liked me as a new friend, and I was the only one that showed her any attention. Wherever I went, she was kind of just there, always a step behind me, right in my periphery. We were required to take buddies to the bathroom, and whenever I casually mentioned I was going, she would jump up and volunteer to take me. Nothing weird. I started noticing strange habits of hers, though. Whenever we walked to an activity, she would walk next to me. And if she noticed our walking was out of sync, like my right leg went forward when her left leg did, she would skip to adjust it so we were walking the same way. Now that sounds a little questionable. I thought maybe I was overthinking it until several of my lodge mates mentioned that they were noticing stuff happening as well, without me saying anything. During meals, we ate at an outdoor pavilion with open seating, but even though she sat across the entire pavilion away from me, she never stopped watching. I would go up to the buffet and fill my plate, noticing that as I sat down, she would go up and choose the exact same foods as me, while still watching me. This happened with every activity from arts and crafts to rock climbing, etc. At this point, I wasn't creeped out yet. I was just a little weirded out by her tendencies. On a Thursday, and the day of the week matters, I was just starting a challenging section during our hiking and survival class. The trail was pretty steep and rocky, and I slipped and twisted my ankle, causing me to be forced to stay in the infirmary during the activity times for the rest of the week. The following week, I watched as Chloe went out of her way to request the same difficult hiking trail that I had gotten injured on. I was kind of perplexed by this. Of course, the Thursday of that week I watched as she faked fainting on the trail and was also forced to stay in the infirmary alone with me. My 1 hour a day that I could escape her was now also taken away. I started to get pretty annoyed by her because no matter what I was doing, she was always there. We had to switch lodges midway through the session, and I was genuinely angry when she requested not only the same lodge as me, but also the bottom bunk across the aisle from mine. We both chose bottom bunks that were aligned across from each other, so we were facing each other. I started to notice even weirder things. I was writing in my journal one day and felt like I was being watched. I looked to my right, and I saw Chloe was sitting facing forward, but her head was cocked to the side, staring at me with a demonic-like smile. My stomach dropped. A couple nights after that encounter, I woke up with the same feeling of being watched. It was pitch black, but I grabbed my phone light to walk to the bathroom since I was already up. But then I turned over with my light to see Chloe standing next to my bunk at my level, watching me sleep and whispering my name. Just standing in the middle of the lodge, staring, like she was possessed with some demonic entity. I was speechless. I just figured maybe she needs someone to take her to the bathroom. I started to leave for the bathroom and she followed, but I was thoroughly creeped out. Stuff like that kept happening for the rest of the session, but when her parents finally came to get her, I refused to even look at her to say goodbye. She tried to give me a bracelet with a rock pendant that had both our names carved into it. I have never been so happy to leave a place in my life. I can't express the level of creepiness over typing this, but I can literally say I felt like I was in danger when I was near her. I never want to figure out why she was seemingly obsessed with me,